Hello fellow fic writers! Kudos for clicking on this video. My name is Cora and I'm here to help you write and post your dream fanfiction. Now, we all know that we write fanfiction for fun or personal reasons, and sometimes that means a lot of writers like to slap their work online with little to no editing. And that's completely valid. It's your hobby. But if you're the kind of fic writer who is passionate about polishing your work but doesn't know where to start, this video is for you. I'll be sharing the editing process I've been using for book 2 of my fanfiction trilogy, one that's helping me create quality chapters for my readers without sacrificing the fun of the process. But before we get into that, it's time for the Sunday Bar Notice. Just like we all prefer different toppings on our Sundays, we all have different ways of writing and polishing our stories. The point of this video is to explain a simplified version of the method that works for me, so you can pick and choose which parts work for you. What matters most is if you're feeling fulfilled by your writing process. Chapter 1, the developmental edit. This is actually something I do during the outlining process. Basically, the developmental edit is where you focus on the big picture elements of the story. Things like scrapping your climax and starting from scratch, or promoting a subplot to the main plot, or switching out your main protagonist. They're the kind of thing that may require a full or at least partial rewrite of your draft. During the developmental edit, you should focus on your story's through line and major plot points, setting and world building, characterization and motivation, and your character and relationship arcs. As you can tell, developmental edits are the most intensive and can throw tens or hundreds of thousands of words in the bin. That's why I prefer to create a detailed outline and then do my developmental edit before I even begin writing the first draft. If the draft ends up going in a different direction than planned, I stop, do the necessary developmental edits in my outline, and then continue drafting. I also think this approach serves the fanfiction workflow better, since we're often still writing a story as we're publishing it, and thus tend to approach each drafted chapter as its own beast rather than part of the whole as traditional writers would. Chapter 2, the markup. Once you have a drafted chapter, the next step is to go through it and highlight or make a note of any issues you see. Word processors like Word and Google Docs have commenting features that are really helpful here. During the markup stage, you should look for everything. But for some specific examples, long exposition dumps and descriptions, repetitive words and phrases, wonky phrasing, inconsistencies and continuity errors, scenes and sections that you think could be worth rewriting, rearranging, or outright deleting, out of character moments, and anything else that has off vibes. You can figure out the issues later. The goal here is to find problems, not fix them. This will be foundational to your next 3 editing rounds, as you'll be able to go into each one knowing what needs to be fixed. Chapter 3, the structural edit. This is when you remove blocks of text, add new scenes, or rewrite or rearrange the ones you already have. While doing your structural edit, you'll want to fix and refine filler scenes. Is it repetitive? Does it serve to flesh out your characters or world? Does it progress the plot in some way? Long exposition dumps. Does the reader need to know this all now, or at all? Could you incorporate some of it later in the story when it's more relevant? Inconsistencies with the plot, character, or world building. Scene and chapter breaks. Do they end in the right spot? Should this scene be used to close this chapter or open the next one? Pacing issues. Does a scene need to be fleshed out more? Does it drag on for too long? Does the reader have the chance to catch their breath between high tension moments? And finally, tension. Does the reader care about what's happening in this scene? If not, how can you improve that? Now, it can be hard removing and replacing hundreds or thousands of words that you've spent a lot of time writing. That's why I have a document for all my cut paragraphs and scenes, so I can refer back to them if I want to, or potentially find a way to include them in another story. Of course, that's just a lie I tell myself, but it makes killing my darlings easier, and that's what counts. Chapter 4, the copy edit. So, copy is a niche term in marketing and publishing that refers to the words contained in an article, website page, social media caption, or book. Therefore, a copy edit focuses on the words themselves. This is also known as a line edit. When doing the copy edit, you'll want to focus on description. Is it too little or too much? Prose. Too simple or too purple? Can you say the same thing more concisely without sacrificing important details? Or do you need to add specificity? Dialogue. Does it align with the character's speech patterns? Ergo, would he fucking say that? Subtext. Does the story spoon-feed everything to the reader or give them just enough context to figure it out on their own? In a monologue, is your character no thoughts, head empty, or do they spend 5 pages pondering something as only 2 seconds pass in real time? Consistent POV. If you have a POV character, do you accidentally describe or point out things they wouldn't actually notice? If you're writing in omniscient, is it clear who the narrator is focusing on at any given point? Accuracy. Did you use the correct terminology here? Did you repeat a common misconception? After the copy edit, your draft should finally be taking shape into something you're ready to publish, but there's one more editing round to go. Chapter 5, the proofread. So by now you've killed your darlings, polished up your prose, and as a result, your story or chapter has gone through a lot of transformation. But it has meant that a lot of your smallest errors may have slipped through the cracks. We've reached the final round, the proofread. When doing a proofread, you should look out for flow. Do you find yourself getting tripped up or having to reread certain sentences? Tense. Do you accidentally slip into past tense when your story is meant to be in present? Clarity. For example, if you're writing a scene between 2 characters who use she/her pronouns, is it clear which character any given she is referring to? Paragraph breaks. Every time a different character speaks, does it start on a new line? If the subject changes, do you make it its own paragraph? And of course, spelling, grammar, and punctuation. So you know those pesky typos that show up after you publish your work? Why couldn't you catch them before? Well, when you look at the same words in your document long enough, you tend to get used to what's there and skip over any errors. That's why a common tip is to change the font, format, or color of your text, as that removes just enough familiarity for things like a stray comma or missing full stop to stand out. So there we go. 5 editing rounds to get your fanfic polished for publication. Except there's a secret number 6 that I would be remiss not to cover. Bonus chapter, the beta read. Beta reader is another writing term that means different things in the traditional writing and fanfiction writing spaces. In traditional writing, a beta reader is someone who helps the author gauge what the audience reception of their story might be like. In fanfiction, a beta reader is someone who volunteers to edit your story. Full disclosure, this is the part I had the least experience with so far, as I only got a beta reader myself recently. What I do know is that there's no specific way to incorporate them into your editing process. A beta reader can do lots of things, including point out anything they find confusing, give feedback on what they enjoyed and what they think could be improved. help you figure out what isn't working about a specific element and workshop a solution with you, do a sensitivity read depending on their lived experience and the content in your story, provide their copy edit or proofread of their work, and most importantly, cheer you on. Because you've been so deeply entrenched in writing and editing this story, you'll know it inside and out. However, it means you can never view your story as objectively as a fresh pair of eyes can. That's where having a beta reader comes in. At the same time, while a lot of writers use beta readers, a lot of them don't, so it's up to you to decide if it's worth your while. Epilogue, some bonus tips. Realistically, your editing process isn't going to be as neat and tidy as it was laid out in this video. I know mine isn't. You might find yourself doing one step multiple times, or some steps out of order, or maybe you'll even skip them. For example, I often do markups during the drafting process, or decide to delete my last 500 words and keep writing from there. Space out your editing rounds. You'll get more out of them if you approach your manuscript with fresh eyes each time. That's why I won't do the structural edit until months after drafting a chapter, and then I'll wait at least another day before tackling the copy edit and the proofread. Remember the 70% rule. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but 70%. You also don't need to make your writing as good as published fiction, because that is not our goal. Sometimes amateur mistakes add to fanfic's charm, and often fanfic has different rules and expectations than published fiction. For example, a greater focus on the emotions of the characters. Some stories may need more editing than others. For example, a sprawling epic with a wide cast and world building has far more opportunity for sluggish pacing or plot holes to sneak in, simply because there is a lot to keep track of. A drabble, on the other hand, might just need a quick proofread and then it's ready to go. Read out loud during the copy edit and proofread. It's a great way to ensure your writing flows, and if you have a flair for the drama and act out each character, it can help you figure out if they sound right too. And finally, if you're using a backlog, track your editing progress. You may be writing one chapter or story while marking up, structure editing, copy editing, or proofreading others. That's why I use a checklist to cover which chapters have gone through which editing rounds. Hope you found these tips helpful. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or tips of your own. Also, I have an exciting announcement. I am proud to introduce you to my new Write Your Dream Fanfiction Discord server. This is a community where we can help each other write and post our dream fanfictions. Want to get feedback on a snippet of your work, workshop a summary, ask for advice, or even share your fave fanfic memes? This is the place for you. Also, I'm sorry to disappoint my younger fellow fic writers, but it is 18 plus for safety reasons and the fact that it may allow discussions of adult content in future. Minors are still welcome to seek advice through the comments section or my ask box on Tumblr. For anyone who is 18 or over, I really hope this community will make us all feel supported on our own fanfic journeys, no matter how far along we are. The invite link is in the description. And that's the end of the video. Kudos for watching, kudos for liking, and extra kudos if you've subscribed for more dreamy fanfiction tips. I will see you in my next video. But in the meantime, happy fic writing!